The voicemail was left at 2:47 a.m. His voice was steady. Professional, almost. Vivian, I'm not doing this anymore. I've filed. You'll get the papers at your hotel. I've moved my things out. The lease is in both our names, so we'll figure that out later. This isn't about blame. We just want different things now. Wait, not I. Wait. I listened to it twice. Set my phone on the hotel desk. Showered. Dressed. Met my client at 8 a.m. for a board presentation like nothing had changed. Because in a way nothing had. I'd known for months. My name is Vivian. I'm 38. I work in organizational consulting, the kind where companies hire you to tell them what's broken and how to fix it. I'd been in Singapore for 6 weeks restructuring a pharmaceutical company's Asia-Pacific division when David left the message. David and I met at a conference in 2016. He was in HR for a tech startup. I was presenting on change management frameworks. We had coffee afterward, talked for 3 hours, missed our flights. We were married by 2018. He used to say I was the calmest person he'd ever met. That I made chaos feel manageable. I think he meant it as a compliment at first. By year 4 it became the problem. You don't react to anything, he said once after I came home from a month-long project in Berlin. I could tell you the apartment burned down and you'd just ask if I called the insurance company. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. My work taught me early that emotion creates noise. Noise obscures patterns. Patterns are where the truth lives. So I watched. I noticed when he stopped asking about my trips. When his text responses got shorter. When he started going to his brother's place every other weekend without inviting me. I noticed the new gym membership he never used. The book club that met on Thursday nights but never seemed to read books. The way he tilted his phone away from me when notifications came in. Small things. Most people would have confronted him. Demanded explanations. Checked his messages. I didn't. Instead, I did what I do for work. I gathered data. 3 months before Singapore, I opened a separate bank account. Moved my consulting retainers there instead of our joint account. Not all of them. Just enough. I made copies of everything important. Lease agreement. Tax returns. Insurance policies. His employment contract from the startup where he still worked. The one that included a non-compete clause he'd signed without reading carefully. I updated my will. Changed the beneficiary on my life insurance. Rerouted my retirement contributions. I backed up our shared cloud storage to an external drive, including the folder labeled, Personal, David, that he thought was private. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because patterns don't lie, and the pattern was clear. He was leaving. It was just a matter of when. The voicemail from Singapore simply confirmed the timeline. I called him back the next morning. He answered on the first ring. Sounded relieved. Almost. Vivian. Did you get my message? I did. Silence. And? He asked. I understand. We can handle the logistics when I'm back. Another pause. That's it? You're not going to fight this. Would it change anything? He hesitated. No. Probably not. Then there's nothing to fight. I could hear him breathing. Trying to decide if I was being cold or reasonable. I know this seems sudden, he said finally. But I've been thinking about it for a while. We're just on different paths now. I know. You know. I'm not surprised, David. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed anything? I don't know. Maybe. Then we'll never know. We hung up a few minutes later. He said he'd have his lawyer send over the paperwork. I said that was fine. I didn't tell him I'd already consulted with an attorney 2 months ago. Didn't mention the separate account. Didn't bring up the external drive or the beneficiary changes. Those weren't things he needed to know yet. The divorce papers arrived 4 days later. Standard no-fault filing. Irreconcilable differences. Clean split of assets or so he thought. He'd listed our joint account as the primary asset to divide. $43,000 in savings we'd built together over 6 years. What he didn't realize was that I'd moved $68,000 of my consulting income into the separate account before he filed. Money I'd earned. Money that was legally mine. He also didn't realize that the apartment lease he wanted us to figure out later had a clause I'd negotiated when we renewed it last year. If one party vacated voluntarily, they forfeited their claim to the security deposit and became solely responsible for any lease-breaking fees. He'd moved out. I hadn't. I didn't point this out in my response to his lawyer. I just acknowledged receipt of the papers and said I'd have my attorney review them. His lawyer sent a follow-up email a week later. Friendly. Professional. Suggesting we mediate rather than litigate to keep costs down for both parties. I agreed to mediation. That's when things started to shift. The mediator's office was in a converted brownstone in Brooklyn. Neutral territory. David arrived with his lawyer, a woman named Patricia who looked like she ran marathons and drank green juice. Efficient. Sharp. I arrived alone. Patricia seemed surprised. Your attorney isn't joining us? I'm representing myself for now, I said. Just here to listen. David glanced at Patricia. Some silent communication I wasn't meant to understand. The mediator, a man named Douglas with a gray beard and wire-rimmed glasses, walked us through the process. Assets. Debts. Division of property. Timeline. Patricia laid out David's position. Split the joint account evenly. Split the furniture. Walk away clean. Douglas turned to me. Ms. Chen, does that seem reasonable to you? It's a starting point, I said. David frowned. What does that mean? It means we should make sure we're accounting for everything. Patricia leaned forward. Is there something specific you're concerned about? I pulled a folder from my bag. Printed spreadsheets. Bank statements. Contribution records. I've tracked our financial contributions over the past 6 years, I said. Joint account deposits. Bill payments. Rent. Utilities. Groceries. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. Patricia scanned it. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened slightly. David looked confused. What is this? A record, I said. You contributed $89,000 to our joint expenses over 6 years. I contributed $127,000. Silence. You were keeping score? David's voice was tight. I was keeping records. Douglas cleared his throat. Ms. Chen, are you suggesting the joint account should be divided proportionally rather than equally? I'm suggesting we be accurate about what joint means. Patricia flipped through the pages. She knew where this was going. This doesn't include retirement accounts, she said. Correct. Those are separate. Or the value of the lease. Also correct. Though I believe we need to discuss who's responsible for breaking it. David's face was pale now. I'm not trying to screw you over, Vivian. I just want to move on. I know, I said. So do I. But the record stayed on the table. The mediation session ended without resolution. Patricia requested a second meeting. Douglas agreed. We scheduled for 2 weeks out. That night, David texted me. Why are you doing this? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Doing what? Making this difficult. We can just split things and move on. We will. Once we're clear on what we're splitting. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I didn't cheat on you. I'm not trying to take anything that's not mine. I just want out. I believed him. About the cheating at least. But wanting out didn't mean he understood what out actually cost. I'm not making this difficult, I wrote back. I'm making it accurate. He didn't respond. If you've stayed with me this far, I appreciate it. The story gets quieter from here, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. The second mediation session was different. David came alone. No Patricia. Douglas seemed surprised. Mr. Torres, where's your attorney? I decided I didn't need one for this conversation. He looked tired. Thinner than I remembered. Douglas glanced at me, then back to him. Are you sure that's wise? I'm sure. We sat down. Douglas opened his folder. Before he could speak, David said, I looked at your numbers. You're right. You contributed more financially. I didn't respond. But I contributed in other ways, he continued. I managed the apartment. I coordinated everything when your mom was sick. I handled all the insurance paperwork when you were traveling. I know. So doesn't that count for something? It does. He blinked. Then why? Because you want to quantify it, I said. And I don't know how to do that fairly. Silence. Douglas shifted in his seat. What if we just split the joint account evenly? David said quietly. And you keep your consulting money. I keep my salary. We both walk away. What about the lease? He looked down. I'll pay half the break fee. You moved out voluntarily. I know. The lease terms are clear. His hands were shaking slightly. Vivian, I can't afford the full break fee and first month's rent on a new place. I'm asking you to meet me halfway. I could have said no. Could have held to the contract he'd signed without reading carefully, the same way he'd signed his non-compete without understanding it. But I didn't. 60-40, I said. I'll cover 60% of the break fee. You cover 40. He looked up. Really? Really? Douglas made notes. David nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay. We signed paperwork that afternoon. Filed jointly. The divorce was finalized 8 weeks later. Clean break. Almost. 2 months after the divorce was final, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this Vivian Chen? Speaking. This is Jennifer Walters. I'm an attorney representing your ex-husband David Torres. I sat down. Regarding. Mr. Torres is in a dispute with his former employer. During discovery, we found that he signed a non-compete agreement that may have been improperly enforced. We're told you have a copy of his original employment contract. I'd forgotten about that. I might, I said carefully. Would you be willing to provide it? It could be very helpful to his case. I thought about it. David had left his startup 6 months before we separated to take a job with a competitor. Better title. Better pay. The startup had sent a cease and desist letter, but he'd ignored it. Now they were suing him. What's he being sued for? I asked. Breach of contract. Trade secret misappropriation. They're seeking $200,000 in damages. I pulled up my external drive. Found the folder. Opened his employment contract. The non-compete clause was vague. Probably unenforceable in New York, but it would take a good lawyer to argue that. I'll send it over, I said. Jennifer sounded relieved. Thank you. Mr. Torres will appreciate this. He doesn't need to know it came from me. A pause. Understood. I sent the file that night. Never heard back from Jennifer. Never heard from David either. But 3 months later, I saw on LinkedIn that David had changed jobs again. Back to HR consulting. No mention of the lawsuit. I assume it's settled. A year after the divorce, I got a message from him. Just 2 sentences. Thank you for the contract. And for not making things worse than they had to be. I read it twice. Thought about responding. But there wasn't anything left to say. I deleted the message and went back to work. These days I live in a smaller apartment in Queens. 1 bedroom. No shared lease. No joint accounts. I still travel for consulting work. Still help companies find the patterns they can't see. Still keep detailed records. People ask if I'll get married again. I usually say I don't know. The truth is I'm not sure I'm built for it. David was right about one thing. I don't react the way most people do. I don't fight. I don't yell. I don't make scenes. I watch. I prepare. I let things run their course. Some people call that cold. I call it careful. Because the thing about patterns is they always reveal themselves eventually. You don't have to force them. You don't have to chase them down. You just have to wait. And when the pattern becomes clear, you act. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Just out of accuracy. I still have the external drive. Backed up. Password protected. I haven't opened it in months. Probably never will again. But I know it's there. And that's enough.